Imagine a person trusted by presidents, generals, and billionaires. A person whose company was valued at $9 billion without a single working product. A person who, within just a few years, went from the world's youngest billionaire to a prison sentence. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes, and this is one of the most notorious financial downfalls of the 21st century. Elizabeth Holmes was born in 1984 in Washington, D.C., into a family where status and ambition were part of everyday life. Her father worked in major government and corporate institutions, and her mother worked for the U.S. Congress. From childhood, Elizabeth grew up with the feeling that she was meant to achieve something significant. She became fascinated early on by the stories of great entrepreneurs, especially Steve Jobs, and dreamed not just of making money, but of leaving a mark on history. At 18, she enrolled at Stanford University in an engineering program. It was there that the idea emerged that would later be heard by investors around the world. The idea sounded simple and brilliant: to run hundreds of blood tests from a single small drop of blood taken from a finger. No pain, no long lines, fast and cheap. In theory, this was supposed to change the entire healthcare system. In 2003, without finishing her studies, Holmes dropped out of Stanford and founded Theranos. She was only 19 years old. She had no finished technology, but she was confident that the solution could be created along the way. This is where the key trait of the entire story took shape: the belief that a promise matters more than reality. And at this very moment, the first logical question arises: how could anyone believe this at all? In Silicon Valley, there has long been an unspoken rule: fake it till you make it. Startups sell an idea for years before they have a finished product. Investors are used to the fact that vision comes first, results later. But the problem was that Elizabeth Holmes transferred this logic into the field of medicine, a field where mistakes are not app glitches but incorrect diagnoses, treatments, and risks to human life. Most investors had no medical background and did not realize that laboratory diagnostics cannot simply be fixed later. They were not investing in blood tests. They were investing in a story. Early investors were investing not so much in the technology as in Elizabeth herself. She knew how to speak in a way that made people want to believe her. She deliberately lowered her voice, dressed in a restrained manner, and always wore black turtlenecks, imitating Steve Jobs. She spoke about a mission, about saving lives, about a future in which healthcare would become accessible to everyone. Over time, an aura of untouchability formed around Theranos. Its board of directors included people far removed from medicine but extremely influential: former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former defense secretaries, generals, and political figures. For many investors, this was a clear signal. If these people were involved, everything must have been thoroughly vetted. But here, another question arises: why didn't any of them stop it? The problem was that the Theranos board of directors was almost entirely composed of people without expertise in medicine or biochemistry. They came from political and military backgrounds, accustomed to trusting authority and hierarchy. Elizabeth Holmes tightly controlled information, hiding behind claims of commercial secrecy. Critical questions were interpreted as a lack of faith in the mission. As a result, the board became not a mechanism of oversight, but a symbol of legitimacy. By 2014, Theranos had raised more than $700 million in investments. The company was valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes personally owned about 50% of the company, and Forbes estimated her net worth at $4.5 billion. At 30, she became the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. At the same time, a crucial detail remained hidden. The technology did not work as publicly claimed. The devices Theranos showcased at presentations could not reliably perform the promised tests. In reality, the company often used standard laboratory equipment from third-party manufacturers, and the results from a single drop of blood were inaccurate, and sometimes even dangerous for patients. So what was really happening inside the company? Inside Theranos, an atmosphere of fear prevailed. Teams were isolated from one another. Employees could not see the full picture. Engineers and lab technicians knew the test results were unstable, but any attempt to speak up ended in termination. Everyone signed strict non-disclosure agreements. The company stopped being a startup trying to build a technology and turned into an organization imitating its existence. And here another question arises: where were the regulators? Theranos exploited legal loopholes. The company presented its devices not as a commercial medical product, but as an internal laboratory tool. This allowed it to avoid full certification. Regulators relied on reports provided by the company itself, rather than independent verification. The control system simply could not keep up with the scale of the deception. Elizabeth Holmes genuinely believed that if she didn't stop and didn't admit the problems, the technology would eventually work. But it never did. In 2015, everything changed. The Wall Street Journal published an investigation exposing the truth about Theranos. Journalists proved that the company had misled investors, partners, and patients. Regulators began inspections, and major partners, including the pharmacy chain Walgreens, terminated their cooperation. Within months, the empire began to crumble. Investors filed lawsuits. Government agencies banned Holmes from holding leadership positions in medical companies. In 2018, Theranos officially ceased to exist. The company's valuation fell from $9 billion to zero. Elizabeth Holmes' personal net worth, $0. Forbes removed her from the list of billionaires. In 2022, a U.S. federal court found her guilty of fraud against investors. She was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison. A person once called the future of Silicon Valley ended up behind bars. And one final question remains: why didn't she stop? According to people close to her, Elizabeth Holmes did not see herself as a fraudster. She believed that the goal justified the path, that if she pushed hard enough, the technology would eventually appear. But with each passing year, admitting the truth became impossible. To do so would have meant destroying not only the company, but her own identity. The story of Elizabeth Holmes is not only about deception and money. It is a story about a culture in which promises are valued more than proof and charisma more than results. About a world where a dream can grow into billions before it ever becomes reality. It is a reminder that in finance, technology, and life itself, the truth can be delayed, but it cannot be canceled. And sooner or later, it arrives with a bill that must be paid in full.